start is 10 minutes.
Well, can I start by saying we don't really need to deconstruct the government's austerity programme. We just need to compare what happened in America over the last 5 years with what happened here. I mean, the stimulus package that Gordon Brown government started, and I mean, I'm not one to keep much praise on Gordon Brown, they've already got that right, meant that by the time the coalition came to power, the British economy was growing about 2.5% a year. And exactly the same way that Obama said he would not make cuts in services or increases in taxes until they recovered all the size of the economy that we lost. They put it off until the end of last year, and America had recovered all the GDP growth it had lost. Cameron Osborne, economic illiterates, as you said, come to power, made savage cuts, and since then the economy has flatlined. We're now in a longer economic downturn than during the Great Depression. They got out of the Great Depression in 4 years. We're now at the end of the 5th year, and still the prospect of another year or two before we recover all that ground that's actually lost. So I think most people can see and recognise this. But there's two long-term trends that have completely undermined the British economy, and I believe are central to any progressive movement to actually challenge. One is to look at the situation of our manufacturing. I mean, we've ended up with a completely unbalanced economy. Germany, that Edmund Land keeps invoking, has got it much better than we have. Their youth unemployment is 1/3 what ours is. Their manufacturing is modernised, driven, high-tech, creating good jobs for working class people, is virtually twice the size of ours. And what's been the fundamental reason why our manufacturing base has withered away, theirs has remained strong, has a lot to do with interest rates. There's only one period in the last 100 years when British manufacturing grew. That was between 1931 and 1951. Because the national government, the Tory government really, froze interest rates at 2%. And the incoming Labour government came out and continued that to 51. 20 years, which interest rates were 2%. Once we got out of the Depression in the 1930s, it was attractive to people to expand their manufacturing capacity, to start a new firm, because you could borrow money at 2%. But there was always hostility to that in the City of London, because if you've got low interest rates, well, international financial deals aren't particularly attractive here. They want to go where they get a better rate of return. And so the incoming Tory government in 51 stopped that. Interest rates went up and up and up. And this has gone right the way through my lifetime. Look at the 1990s and the first decade of this century, where if you lived through the interest rates of the 70s and the 80s, it looked bloody good. Interest rates basically bubbled along about 5%. But in Germany, they're at 3%. Why would anyone in their right mind come to Britain to open some productive capacity when they're going to have to pay 60% more in terms of the interest payments on establishing that plant? And so low interest rates has got to be at the core of how we build our way out of this, and the financial institutions will be totally hostile to that. Because effectively, Germany kept its interest rates low. They had a small financial sector, a big manufacturing centre. We went the other way. That question of interest rates is crucial to what structure of your economy you're going to have. And then there's, of course, the Attlee government got that one right. One the Attlee government got wrong was military spending. They got caught up with all this crap about the Cold War. And those of you that like conspiracy theories, I recommend, what's his name, the guy who did the Kennedy assassination. Oliver Stone, that's it. He's got a telly series, but don't worry about that. There's a really good detailed book showing the origins of the Cold War were about protecting America's corporate interests. Stalin had no plans to invade the whole world. He just wanted to continue his own mad internal regime without the external threat. But we bought into that. The Attlee government sacrificed a chunk of health spending in order to a major rearmaments program. And that's also been another thing that's strained our economy. Year by year by year, we spend more of our wealth on the military than our major European rivals. Where are we at today? We're spending 3% of our GDP on the military. France is doing 2%, Germany is doing 1%. And why? So British Prime Ministers who are totally incompetent at managing our economy can go and suck our governments to actually ours, at least the French do. I think they can launch their own and start a war on their own. We can't. We can't do that. Ours are actually effectively an extension of NATO. We don't have our own independent targeting system. And the idea that we're going to spend 20 billion to build these submarines and then about £100 billion over the next 30 years to run down things. I mean, look at the one dramatic change there was. France, when I was growing up, was always in the basket case economically. And then in the 1960s, it leapfrogged past Britain. Why? Because de Gaulle, when he brought the war in Algeria to an end, cut military spending by 2% of GDP. That went into productive investment. And that's the key. A single biggest factor, not just the biggest, but equal to every other economic factor, is the level of investment you're making in your economy. By investment, I mean really building things, not speculating in bloody mortgages in America and things like that, which a lot of our so-called investment has really been. I mean, we, in our best years, the early 70s, were investing 20% of our GDP. We're living along 14% at the moment. We're in a position where Germany was always about 5% ahead of us. That's why Hungary was taken successful, and we haven't. We've got to lift down investment. And the biggest single part of that is public sector investment. Labour and Tory governments in the 30s after the war invested 5.5% of our GDP in public infrastructure, housing, roads, transport. Thatcher cut that to 1%. Pathetically, Blair lifted it to 1.5%. You need to get back to a massive programme investment, and nowhere more important than in housing. All these other big projects, the Crossrail's one of them. It took me about 7 years to get the agreement to go and do it. It takes about another 8 years for it opens. If you want to get public sector investment, of course, that's what we build homes. We have nearly 2 million families on the waiting list in this country because Thatcher stopped building council housing, and to exchange the Labour government continued that policy. Nowhere is that more obvious here. And the key thing about this, I'm a monetarist. I don't believe you can borrow your way forever. I mean, you borrow to get out of recession. What all the politicians forget is the case of when you're out of recession, take the bloody money back. You don't go off and carry on borrowing and boom. You just load debt on your descendants. And the reality is, we could have a major programme of house building without borrowing it. The Bank of England, over the last 5 years, has electronically created or printed £375 billion to prop up the banks, basically. If you just took the Bank of England printed £25 billion a year, you'd actually be able to get 100,000 homes to rent. The bank would own them, they pass them to local authorities to rent them out. You create work, depending on which economist you believe, anything between 600,000 and 700,000 workers. You put them back to work, they're off the door, they're spending money. Then you look at other things you do. None of these involve borrowing a penny. I mean, an incoming Labour government should simply freeze rents, energy costs, water costs, and fares. Saying we're freezing for 3 or 4 years so that drain on ordinary people's spending stops, they can start spending more in a way that creates alternative jobs.
2 minutes.
We should actually say the minimum wage, there's just nothing like minimum wage effectively locks us into a low wage economy. We introduced the living wage in London. We could only impose it on our contractors. They all moaned about it. They came back after and said, it's amazing. Staff turnover is down, productivity is up, sickness is up. We're better off paying a better wage than we were when we were paying less. And that Labour government was across all employment. Put £2 an hour extra back into the pocket of every worker. We move away from that low wage economy. They spend the money. They generate new jobs for other people. And then finally, there's a question of how do you pay that living wage? And also, of course, a cut in VAT to boost spending. And the simple fact is, if you crack down on corporate tax avoidance, you can fund this 10 times over. And there's a simple fact. Come up with genuine tax avoidance because that's what the Tory party those things, the British economy will be growing by a good 3%, I believe, within 12 months. You block a Labour government into an entire long period of growth. We would win the economic argument about ending inequality and a fairer society and decent wages and building others. And you lay the foundation for a generation of change. And that's where we are. In the same way that the 45 election didn't just lock Labour integration, the welfare state, but the Tories had to accept it. And the 79 election didn't just lock the Tories into horrible Thatcherism, but ended up with Blair saying, what did he say, Daisy died? It was my job to build on what she'd done, not roll it back. Well, here's the time to roll it back. In this 2 years before the next election, to win the economic and intellectual debate about how we can have a fairer society without spending a penny on bloody borrowing to balance the budget.